The Smithsonian's National Museum for African Americans will open its doors exactly on September 24th. More than 3,000 exhibits will be in the museum, among them a small exhibit honoring Bill Cosby. Now, of course, this is the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. The museum, of course, has built a collection of a number of exhibits, and according to the curator, Lonnie Bunch, he said that one of the exhibits will be a small one that deals with Bill Cosby's history. In terms of I Spy, in terms of the Cosby Show, and also his role at really creating the Black Stuntmen's Association. Well, that has not sat well with some of his alleged victims. They say that is wrong, that there should not be an exhibit honoring Bill Cosby. They also say that when it comes to this exhibit, there should at least be some mention of their sexual assault allegations against him. Now, you might remember in late 2014, when we interviewed Bill Cosby at the Museum of African Art, the Smithsonian's Museum there was a lot of criticism because they had a huge display there of the artwork of Bill and Camille Cosby. She actually sits on the board of directors of that particular museum. Well, they eventually, after getting lots of criticism, installed a placard there that explained, that included comments about the sexual assault allegations. So the real question is, should Bill Cosby be honored at this museum? Also, should there be some notification of these alleged sexual assault allegations? Joining us right now to break it down, first we'll talk about it with our panel as well, but also we have a guest who joins us right now. She's a professor. She's a professor at Hunter College, if I'm correct. And so I want to go to her right now, please. Kelly Carter Jackson, assistant history professor at Hunter College. Kelly, what do you make of this? Because when you listen to Lonnie Bunch, this is a national museum. It is undeniable the historical impact of Bill Cosby.
For sure. I think there are two things to think about when thinking of this historic museum. They have collected over 35,000 items, and this museum still will not be exhaustive. So there's no way to completely tell the full portrait or the full picture of African American history. I think that their team of curators has worked extremely hard to try to figure out what are the key moments, what are the pivots in African American history, and how can we best display them. I also think the second issue of this is really talking about the idea that the gift is not the giver. I think that if we think about the contributions that Bill Cosby has made, we have to recognize the fact that Heathcliff Huxtable is not Bill Cosby. I think we have to acknowledge the fact that in the course of TV history, the Cosby Show has been transformative. And if we were to use that standard for Cosby, I think it would only be fair that we would have to use it for every single person who has contributed to this museum. And so I think it would be intensely difficult to do. You know, it's really hard to separate people, the art from the artist. So how do you look at Miles Davis's work and not look at the fact that also he's an abuser? How do you look at Martin Luther King and not look at the fact that he's also had extramarital affairs? How do you look at the life of Michael Jordan and look at his tennis shoe industry and not look at the fact that he's also heavily invested in for-profit prisons?
All right, let's stop right there. Martin Luther King, basically, there were allegations with nothing ever proved about extramarital affairs. So, you know, she needs to make sure she cleans up, you know, these statements that she makes.
So all of us have these really complicated histories that don't sort of surmise who we are as a person or who our product as a gift. And so I think these things need to all be considered when we look at the three images that are being, or the three objects that are being included within the museum.
One of our panel here, Wilmer.
Well, I think understanding that a lot of what right now Bill Cosby is dealing with are allegations, that and we want our museums to deal in fact. then you state the facts as the facts and you leave the allegations alone. In reading the story about some of the consternation that they're going through with the museum, my bigger question to Dr. Bunch has more to do with whose sensibilities are really being considered as they put the exhibits together in these museums, because in many instances it seems to me as though they're trying to water down the history to placate white visitors, not violating or disrupting the sensibilities of white visitors, as opposed to telling the African in America and African American story as it needs to be told.
Well, one of the things I think also when I look at this so-called controversy is their role is very clear. Again, as I said, and as Dr. said, she talked about Bill Cosby's show, but the reality is here, the Cosby show, that this is showing his history going far back to I Spy and the Stuntmen's Association. So this is not just isolated to just the Cosby show. It's showing over a long period of time, and I just don't think you can ignore that history. How do you have an exhibit on blacks in Hollywood or in television and not include Bill Cosby? And to her point, which I think is a great point, if you have Miles Davis, do you have something saying, oh, this man beat the hell out of women? If Ike Turner, a true music genius, we know about his history when it comes to beating. If you have Marvin Gaye in this museum, do you list drug abuse? I mean, so all of a sudden, you can all of a sudden go.
If I could interject for just a moment.
Okay, go ahead.
Inclusion and exclusion, it's a double-edged sword. So you can't also just have Rosa Parks and her refusal to give up her seat and not include her decades of activism that come before that event, and not include the fact that she is a lead investigator on sexual assault cases in the South. So the fact that Rosa Parks is actively involved in sexual assault cases is pivotal to who she is as a person, but to dwindle her down to just the Montgomery bus boycott is not fair either.
Sure, Michael.
So it's really hard to balance these stories and to give full portraits of who people are in all of their
I got you. Sure, Michael.
No, I think, pertaining to Mr. Cosby, you have to study someone in the totality of their history. And Mr. Cosby has made great contributions to the African American community, particularly when it comes to HBCU. He's been a product of an HBCU. He's given a lot of money. And again, as the professor just noted, these things are accusations. They aren't facts. Museums aren't places where we just have all of these innuendos, as Cosby put in one of his releases, things that have not been determined yet. Now, if there is a point, at some point in the future, where, that he's found guilty of these things, and I do believe you note them, but until that time, absolutely he should be honored in the museum.
Yolanda?
What we have to remember is this is a museum. This is not going to be our only meal. And so we can start we can start with this now, and then later, 10 years from now, maybe that'll be the appropriate time to deal with Cosby and the issue of the sexual harassment.
All right, folks, we got to leave it there. I surely appreciate it.
All right, exactly. It's just another attempt to erase Bill Cosby from the history books, including black history books and museums, which is a bunch of bullshit. He has not been convicted of a single thing. It's been shown that a bunch of these white women have absolutely lied, and we need to deal with the rest of them who probably have lied in an attempt to smear this guy and to get at his money. And I honestly believe this is all stemming from his attempt at trying to buy NBC, and them trying to figure out a way to go after him.